Hi, I'm Dolores Hydock, and I'd like to welcome you to Healing Moments, a 24-hour storytelling channel. This is one of 12 episodes of Healing Moments, each 30-minute program bringing you a variety of stories and storytellers. People say that laughter and hope are wonderful medicine, and it's our hope that these stories, full of laughter and hope, might entertain you, comfort you, and inspire you to tell a story or two of your own. We begin with Tennessee storyteller Hannah Harvey, who remembers a strong, wise woman in her life.
My grandparents met on a blind date. It was 1939, and it was dark that night. And as the car pulled up outside of my grandmother's apartment, my grandmother lived there with another woman, and the two of them, they got out and they looked at that car. There were two men inside, and they couldn't see. It was so dark. And so my grandmother, she said, "Somebody light a match. I want to see what I'm looking at." And so somebody handed her a match. And she lit it, and she held that match up, and she liked what she saw. She later told me she was the handsomest man in the county. And he must have liked what he saw, because as she held that match light up, it lit up his face, but it also lit up hers. Her dark, deep brown eyes and that dark hair. Just so. He later said, "Law, she was purty." And as she held that match light up, what my grandfather didn't know at the time is that she was careful to keep that match lit up to her smile and those eyes and that slender frame. Because if she'd held that match down a little bit, he would have seen her feet. And my grandmother was born with a foot deformity. When she was born, the doctors were afraid she would never walk. And so, growing up in Abingdon, Virginia, her mother, my great-grandmother, she took her way off to Richmond. She had several surgery after surgery on her little feet. And when she was a tiny girl, a toddler, she took those first tentative steps, and she kept on walking. As she grew up on that farm, she would toddle on those tiny, surgeried feet, and she would toddle out to the barn where they kept the chickens. And she told me she toddled out there, and she saw those little chicks, and they were yellow. She thought they'd be pretty or green. And so she took those little feet and she toddled on out to the barn, got herself some green paint, and by the time my great-grandmother came over, she was painting those chickens green, and there were little green chicks just walking out, beep, 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 out in the yard. And I later asked my grandmother what happened to them. She said, "Law, well, I guess they died." But my grandmother, she kept on walking. And when she grew up later, she took those feet and she walked out to the bus station because the farm wasn't big enough for her. And so she left the family farm, she got on the bus, and she traveled across the state lines to Kingsport, Tennessee, because she'd always dreamed of being a nurse. She got herself an apartment, she went down to the hospital, and she signed up, and she started her first week of work, and she walked on those feet down that hallway, and by the end of the week, it was very clear to the head doctor that she just wasn't going to make it on those deformed feet. He said, you can't keep up. You just can't keep up, honey. You cannot be a nurse." And she said, "I have to stay in the hospital. I just have to stay. I've always dreamed of this." And so she got herself a job in the switchboard. She worked the switchboard, plugging in, keeping people connected. She took those feet and she walked. And when that man with that light, that man who she liked what she saw, when he proposed to her, well, it was the thing at the time that you would demur. And so she crossed those little feet, crossed those little ankles on the park bench where they were sitting, and she said she just kind of looked away. The second time he proposed, she uncrossed those little feet and she said yes. And she wore her powder blue suit and he wore his army uniform, and they walked, and she scooted those little size 4 feet, scoot, 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 down to the Justice of the Peace, and they were married. But they had to be married, in secret, because she knew her parents wouldn't approve. They waited 3 days later, and at that time, they didn't allow men in her apartment. And so that night that they were married, they said goodnight, and he went on home, and she went on back to her apartment. And 3 days later, they told her family. Those feet that took her as she traveled and followed him where he trained for the Army, down to Florida, out west. Those feet that took her after they were married, that took her off to Memphis, where they lived when they were first married. Those feet that took her back home to Kingsport, Tennessee, where she raised up 2 daughters. Those feet that took her to the beach where she felt that sand warm beneath her toes and under her feet. And growing up, as I traveled with them, when I visited my grandparents, as I went from place to place with her, all those years of making cookies and standing up in her kitchen, I grew accustomed to that familiar scoot, 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 scoot of her feet, but I never knew that her feet were deformed, because she always kept that match held up here to her face. I always focused on her smiling face, her smiling mouth, and her eyes. They were so determined, those deep brown eyes. She kept that match light up and out. And she taught me to keep my own match up and out into the world so I can see what I'm looking at. Never down here to my own limitations. Never down here to my own shortcomings. She taught me to keep that light out so I can see the world I'm going out into, all the people I can interact with and help. She taught me to keep my light out so I can see what I'm looking at.
Storyteller Reggie Carpenter shares a story that reminds us that even small acts of kindness are worth doing.
A grandfather and his grandson were walking on a sandy shore after a terrible storm. The shore was littered with hundreds of starfish, all gasping in the air. The grandson ran ahead of his grandfather, picked up a starfish, and flung it into the ocean, thereby saving its life. He spent the entire morning picking up one starfish after another, saving its life. The grandson was exhausted. The grandfather went over to his grandson, knelt down and said, "You can't save every single one of them." To which the grandson replied, "That's true, but I think I can save this one." He picked up a starfish and flung it into the ocean. The grandfather, understanding what the grandson was saying, bent down, picked up a starfish, and threw it into the ocean. His grandson taught him that day that no action is too small to make a difference.
Actor Michael J. Fox, who starred in Family Ties and Spin City, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1991. Despite his health challenge, he has continued to act and, in addition, advances research for curing Parkinson's through his Michael J. Fox Foundation. In this story tip, West Virginia storyteller Adam Booth remembers listening to his great-grandmother tell stories.
When I was a little boy, I spent a lot of time with my great-grandmother and her sister, and they would tell stories to me and other people in the family. One of the things my mama would always ask me is, "How old are you now?" And when I would tell her, she would say, "Do you feel old?" And I'd say, "No," and she'd say, "Good, because you don't get to say you're old until you turn 100. And then, Adam, you start all over again." As she would tell me things like that, I would be sure to ask her questions like, "How did you get here? And what did your parents do for a living? Did they farm or did they work here?" And she would share stories and wisdom in those stories with me. I'm very happy that I have those stories now because I can share them with other people, and I can also think about ways that I can live a better life myself based upon the advice and wisdom that she gave in those stories.
For many years, Vicki Ford was a volunteer at Sycamore Shoals Hospital in Elizabethton, where she also worked as a hospital courier, picking up and delivering supplies, equipment, and lab specimens. But Vicki was best known at Sycamore Shoals Hospital as the Cookie Lady, delivering homemade cookies to patients, families, and team members throughout the hospital. Let's meet Vicki Ford.
As I've worked through Mountain States as a volunteer, I have worked in the gift shop as a volunteer, and I have worked also as what they call the cookie lady. I make cookies and then take them around to the different patients and to visitors, and then if I have any left over, I give them to the team members. So they always like to see me coming up and down the hallways and with my cookies. And I'll have to say, in the gift shop, some of the outstanding moments that I can think back is, and you don't see a lot of patients in the gift shops. It's mostly visitors or people who are there with the patients and with our clients. And they might come in and they will say, well, my husband or my uncle, in fact, today I had someone to say, I'm here with my uncle and he's having a procedure. And she just wanted to come in and talk. She was restless. And that's my job, part of my job as being a volunteer working in the gift shop, just to listen when somebody wants to come in and share about a loved one. We don't ever make comments, but we listen to what they would have to say and try to reassure them that, yes, we know that everything's going to be okay, and to try to make them feel better. And then as being the cookie lady and going around and sharing cookies with visitors and clients and different people in the hospital, I guess the time that I would think back when I would take it into a room or into one of our service areas and they would say, thank you for doing this. This is so nice. I didn't have any breakfast this morning and I'm hungry and I really appreciate this ministry. And sometimes they offer to pay me. They'll want to give me money for my cookies, and I'll say, no, we don't charge anything for this. This is just something that we do because we want to be of service to the people here at our hospital. And if you want to do something, come in and see us in the gift shop and maybe buy something in the gift shop. But we don't ever charge for the cookies. But when they reach in that pocket and they want to pay you for it, you know that you've done something special for that person because it meant something special to them.
Norman Cousins was an American political journalist, author, professor, and world peace advocate. He gave us this advice. He said, "The more serious the illness, the more important it is for you to fight back, mobilizing all your resources, spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and physical." In the final story of this episode of Healing Moments, West Virginia storyteller Adam Booth tells about a special victory in the face of defeat.
The first time I ever won anything in my life, I was 12 years old. It had been a rough childhood up to that point, and this is that story. If you went out the back door of any of the houses in my South Side neighborhood, after the long field, you'd see railroad tracks, and across the railroad tracks and down about a block and a half, that's where Roll-A-Rama was. That was our neighborhood roller skating rink. I loved to roller skate, but hardly ever got to go there because I grew up in a very, very poor family. But every now and then, my parents could manage to save up just enough money for me to go on Tuesday night when you could get in for a discount, $1. I'd take that dollar, go out the back, across the rails, and over to Roll-A-Rama. I'd give my dollar to the man behind that window, go into that hallway. At the very end, there was a light bulb hanging from a wire that seemed to flicker and move all on its own. At the end of that hallway, 2 big double doors, Texas style. Bam, we would hit them with our hands. Bam, all the kids would fly through there, and then you were in the lacing lobby where those long wooden benches were with the shelves underneath that you could store your shoes on. Over here, there was a counter, a window cut out. Behind it, the same man that took your money at the front window. He was tall, had a big mustache, and was bald. And if you told him what size skates you wore, he'd go around to the back, fish them out of a crate, and bring them to you. So tall, he'd bend over double to give them to you. Over here, another counter on the other wall. Behind it, a pretty young woman from the university that was working there. It smelled like pizza and corn dogs, because this was the concession counter. There was a little window with candy bars lined up into it that I would always look at. It was at my height because I was small for my age. And right there on the corner of the concession counter, there was a tall, crystal clear, barrel-shaped glass jar that was filled with kosher dill pickles. My favorite. I only ever had the $1 to get in, which included your rental skates. So I'd get them, sit down, and start lacing up. And this was the 80s, and my hometown was a bit behind the times. So our skates were carried over from the 70s, high tops, came all the way to your knees. There were 30 pairs of holes that you would have to lace up. It seemed to take forever because rental skates had frayed laces. You lick your fingers, twist them around so that you could sew yourself into those skates. Both legs, all your friends were out on the rink, and finally, after taking forever, you could push out of the lacing lobby onto the worn wooden boards of that rink. With each one pushing faster and faster around. This is where my small size came to my advantage because I could speed past everybody else. And that's when I learned that that $1 didn't just buy entry or the rental skates. No, it bought freedom. Now, hanging from the ceiling in Roll-A-Rama, there was a large white board painted to be divided into 9 different rectangles. Each rectangle had a light bulb in it and words on the outside. And one at a time, the light bulbs would come on. This one normally was on. It said, all skate. When it was on, I was out there speeding around. But when it turned off, this one might turn on. It said, couples only. And I was never out for that one. This one down here, even worse. Ladies' choice. Because I was small and had never won anything, I was never picked. But my favorite was when this one turned on, because when that light bulb lit up and the sign announced something special, all the other lights in Roll-A-Rama would dim down to darkness, and the music would start to play. Bum 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 ba dum ba dum, dun 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 da dun da dum. The tall, bald man with the mustache would skate out with 2 poles and pegs that went up the side. Dum bum bum ba dum dum bum dun da dun da dum. That young college-age student would come out. She'd place a bar across the top. Bum dun dun da dun da dum, dun da dun da dun da dum. And all the kids in Roll-A-Rama would line up behind to play this game. Because if you were the winner, your prize was a coupon for any item that you wanted from the concession counter. For free. And I had the advantage. Round 1. Bum 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 ba dum dun 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 dun. Bum ba dum dun 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 dun. Then I was up. Dun 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 dun. And as they moved the bar down, there were 18 kids left. Round 2. Dun da dum da dun da dum dun da dun da dun da dun. And when I finally got up, bum ba dum ba dum ba dum dun da dun da dun da dun dun da dun da dun da dun. And then there were 9 kids left. They moved it down. Bum ba dum ba dun da dum dun da dun da dun da dun. My turn came. Even though I was small and hadn't won much, I was a bit of a show-off. Bum ba dun da dun da dun, creeping down and da 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 da, and back to the back, dum dum ba dum ba dum. And now there were 2 kids left. They had moved the bar so low it seemed like it was only a foot off the ground. I was first up, and it was time for the secret move, which everybody knew who grew up around roller skating. You take your ear, glue it to your shoulder like this with invisible rubber cement. Do a half a split onto that knee in the same direction. The other side, you reached under and grabbed that space between the sole of your skate and where the wheels were in a square. Take the deepest breath possible, then exhale behind you for propulsion to get you moving towards that bar. I was getting closer and closer. Still could see over it, so I squatted down even lower. Started saying shallow prayers to Smurfs and gnomes to help get me under there. Right as I got up to that bar, crouching even lower, my head hit the bar right there on the corner and knocked it off. Once, twice, 3 times it bounced and rolled down the rink. I stood up and skated off and collapsed on one of those wooden benches in the lacing lobby. Turned just in time to see Claire Houston go under the bar and win She was also small and scrawny like me. I stared down at my feet for a long time, and then I heard this voice from over my shoulder. "Hey, nice move out there." It was Claire. I don't want to talk to her. She just beat me. "Thanks." I looked back down. Then her hand came over my shoulder, grabbed onto mine and said, "Come on." She pulled me up across the Lacing lobby. When we got to the concession counter, she pulled out that coupon she had just won, placed it up there, slid it across, and said, "One, please." That pretty young college student opened up the glass jar. With the tongs, she took one out, gave it to Claire. Claire's little hands snapped it in half, shoved half into my small hand, and we stood there sharing a cool, crisp, crunchy, kosher dill pickle. And then someone said, "Hey, look." We looked out, and on that board, the all-skate light turned off and couples only turned on. "Come on," she said as she grabbed me and pulled me out there. Hand in hand, we skated around and around and around. And that was the first time I had ever won anything in my life.
Thanks for watching Healing Moments. The next episode will begin soon. We hope you'll stay with us for more stories. How Healing Moments came to be. In 2002, a volunteer for Mountain States Health Alliance had an idea. Why don't we share stories of inspiration with our patients? So, Mountain States collaborated with the nearby International Storytelling Center to pioneer an in-hospital television program called Stories for the Soul to enhance the healing environment. When Stories for the Soul was updated in 2016, it became Healing Moments, a selection of stories told by nationally known storytellers and members of the Mountain States family to give inspiration, comfort, and hope to our patients. May these stories bring moments of healing to you and your family.
Hello, I'm Alan Levine. Experts tell us that listening to stories is good for the soul. We also know that it can be comforting to share your own stories or your own concerns. If you would like someone from our spiritual care team to visit with you, tell your nurse or call the hospital switchboard. At Ballad Health, we have staff and volunteer chaplains of all faiths available around the clock to support, listen, or just to sit and talk with you. You just say the word. And now, please enjoy this next episode of Healing Moments.